I always knew my mother favored my older brother, but I never expected her to completely betray me. During his lavish wedding reception, my 8-year-old daughter Marin squeezed my hand so hard her little nails dug into my palm. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling, "can we leave?" I looked down at her surprised. "Why, sweetheart?" She did not answer. She only shook her head and stared past the beautiful floral centerpieces toward my own mother, who was laughing with the guests. Her little face had gone entirely pale. That was the first moment I knew something was wrong, but it would not be until we were back in the car 30 minutes later that she finally whispered the words that turned my blood cold. "Mom, you did not see what Grandma did you? Thank you for watching video. Before I take you back there, do me one small favor. Take a second to like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is where you are. It helps more than you know." My name is Corinne. I am 32 years old, and I spent my entire life trying to earn my mother's love in a house where I was completely invisible. In our family, my older brother Weston was the undisputed king. My mother, Althea, built her entire universe around him, serving as the loyal architect of his golden empire. While I worked my way through college and built a quiet, stable life as a veterinary clinic manager, Weston floated from one expensive mistake to another, always bailed out by my mother's endless excuses. I learned early on to keep my head down and expect nothing. My daily job required me to remain absolutely calm while handling frightened, unpredictable animals. I had no idea that the most dangerous predator I would ever face was the woman who raised me. 2 years ago, my father passed away. He was the only person in the family who saw through my mother's facade. When his will was read, Althea and Weston were completely staggered to learn that he had left the bulk of his liquid assets to Weston, but he had left me something far more specific. To me, he left a vintage sapphire necklace that had belonged to his own grandmother, along with the official deed of inheritance proving I was the sole legal owner. The necklace had been recently appraised at $50,000. It was not just a piece of jewelry. It was a message from the grave that I mattered. My mother was utterly furious. She demanded I hand it over to Weston so he could sell it and invest the money in a business venture. I refused. From that day on, her resentment toward me morphed into a quiet, icy hostility. That brings us to Weston's wedding. He was marrying a woman named Sloane, who came from a very wealthy family, and Weston was desperate to match her lifestyle. Because my apartment complex had recently experienced a string of break-ins, I made the anxious decision to bring the blue velvet box and the manila envelope containing the deed in my large leather tote bag to the wedding. I planned to deposit them straight into a bank safety deposit box the very next morning. I kept the bag tucked under my chair at the reception, believing I was surrounded by family. I was completely wrong. When Marin and I finally reached the quiet safety of my car, the heavy silence broke. She looked at me with tears spilling down her cheeks. "Mom, Grandma went into your bag." I froze, my hands gripping the steering wheel. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" She took a shaky breath. When everyone was clinking their glasses and cheering for Uncle Weston, Grandma knelt down by your chair. She opened the zipper. She took the blue velvet box and the brown envelope. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Did she see you looking?" Marin nodded, looking utterly terrified. She stared right at me and put her finger over her lips. I did not scream. I did not march back inside to cause a scene. I drove us home in utter silence. When we walked through our front door, I dumped my purse onto the kitchen counter. Lipstick, car keys, tissues. The blue velvet box was gone. The manila envelope was gone. I knelt down and pulled my weeping daughter into a fierce hug. I told her she was incredibly brave and that she had done absolutely nothing wrong. As I held her, the last fragile thread of my childhood hope completely snapped. If my mother had taken it, she did it believing I would just cry, avoid the conflict, and accept my role as the victim. But people who think they will never be questioned usually make mistakes. I intended to find hers. The next morning, I did not call my mother. I called the wedding photographer. I told him I was putting together a scrapbook for Marin and asked if he could send me the raw, unedited digital files from the reception. He happily obliged. I spent 3 hours zooming in on the background of every single candid shot taken during the toasts. And then I found it. In the blurred background of a photo showing Weston laughing, there was my mother. She was standing in a shadowed alcove near the coat check, slipping a familiar brown envelope and a blue velvet box into the hands of a tall man in a gray suit. I zoomed in on his face. My blood ran cold all over again. It was Mr. Vance. He was an antique jewelry dealer in our town and an old acquaintance of my late father. My mother was not just stealing a family heirloom out of spite. She was liquidating it. I took the afternoon off from the clinic and drove straight to the office of a prominent estate attorney. I laid out the photograph and explained the situation. She listened in absolute silence, her eyes sharp and assessing. Finally, she leaned forward. "Are you looking for revenge, Corinne, or are you looking for the truth?" I looked her dead in the eye. "I want both." She advised me not to involve the sheriff's department just yet. If Althea smelled a police investigation, she would destroy the deed and claim the necklace was a gift. We needed to let her walk willingly into her own snare. The next day, my lawyer and I paid a quiet visit to Mr. Vance's shop. When I showed him the photograph and told him the necklace was stolen, the color completely drained from his face. He quickly explained that Althea had approached him at the wedding, desperate to sell the sapphire quietly and quickly for cash to help Weston secure a down payment on a luxury house. But Mr. Vance was old school. He knew the necklace belonged to me because my father had consulted him about it years ago. He told Althea he could not process the sale without my legal signature on the deed. My mother, entirely blinded by her own greed, had told him I was out of town but had signed a power of attorney transferring the rights to her. She promised to bring the legal documents to his shop by the end of the week. She had absolutely no idea that she had just handed me the keys to her own destruction. 3 days later, my mother hosted a post-wedding family dinner. I dressed carefully, applied a bright shade of lipstick, and walked into her dining room holding Marin's hand. Weston was there, boasting loudly about the gorgeous 5-bedroom house he and Sloane were about to close on. He looked at me with a trite, arrogant smirk. "Mom really pulled through for us," he bragged, swirling his wine glass. "She secured a private loan to help with the closing costs." Family takes care of family, right, Corinne? My mother sat at the head of the table, wearing a completely smug expression. She took a delicate sip of her water and looked at me. "And how are things at the clinic, Corinne? Still barely scraping by? You really should be more careful with your finances. Especially since you insist on holding onto your father's things instead of putting them to good use." The entire room grew quiet. She was baiting me. She wanted to see if I had noticed the theft, and she was thrilling in her own perceived power. I set my fork down. The silver clinked sharply against the porcelain plate. "I am perfectly fine, Mother. In fact, I recently moved Dad's necklace to a highly secure vault. You know how it is. Things of immense value are always targeted by people who lack basic morality." The icy silence that followed was profound. My mother's mask slipped. Her hand trembled so violently she knocked her water glass over, sending a puddle across the pristine white tablecloth. She scrambled to wipe it up, her breathing suddenly shallow. She had expected me to be a weeping victim, but instead, she was looking into the eyes of a woman who is completely unfazed. People who carry a lie long enough eventually begin defending it before anyone even asks. That night, she barely ate a bite. The trap finally snapped shut on a rainy Tuesday morning. Mr. Vance called my attorney to say Althea had just walked into his shop to finalize the sale. My lawyer and I were already waiting in the back office. Through the cracked wooden door, I listened to the woman who gave birth to me casually lie to the appraiser. She placed the blue velvet box on the glass counter. Beside it, she placed a piece of paper. "Here is the notarized power of attorney," she said smoothly. Corinne signed it herself. "She wants Weston to have the money." The door opened. I walked out, closely followed by my attorney. My mother turned around. When she saw me, her entire world shattered. The smug, Royal posture she had carried her whole life completely crumbled into dust. She backed away from the counter, her mouth opening and closing without making a sound. "That document is a federal forgery, Althea," my attorney said, her voice echoing in the quiet shop. "You just presented a falsified legal document to facilitate estate fraud. That is a felony." My mother looked like a cornered animal. She looked at Mr. Vance, then at my lawyer, and finally at me. Her face twisted into an ugly, desperate sneer. "I did it for your brother," she shrieked, all pretense of elegance gone. "He needed that money for his future. You have nothing. You are a single mother cleaning up after sick dogs. You owe this family." I looked at the woman who had spent 32 years making me feel completely worthless. I felt no anger. I felt no sadness. I just felt cold. "I am not trying to erase my brother, Mother. But you spent my entire life trying to erase me. It stops today." I took the velvet box and the authentic deed from the counter. My lawyer informed her that we had the raw photographs from the wedding, Mr. Vance's sworn testimony, and the forged document she had just foolishly handed over. We could send her to the county jail by nightfall. My mother began to openly weep, begging me to remember that we were family. I looked at her with absolute indifference. I told her I would not press criminal charges, but only out of respect for my father's memory. In exchange, she was to never contact me or Marin ever again. 6 months later, my life is incredibly peaceful. I sold the sapphire necklace to an out-of-state collector and used the $50,000 to secure a beautiful, quiet home in a gated neighborhood and fully fund Marin's college account. I have a life filled with genuine love, a thriving career, and a daughter who knows exactly how to use her voice. Meanwhile, the consequences of my mother's actions completely caught up with her. Without the stolen money, Weston's house purchase fell through. Sloane's wealthy family discovered the massive debts Weston had been hiding, and she filed for a swift divorce. My mother now sits alone in her aging house, financially drained by her golden child, completely isolated from the community that once adored her, and terrified that the truth of her attempted fraud will eventually leak to her church friends. I walked away with my dignity, my inheritance, and the absolute certainty that my father loved me. I gained a profound sense of self-worth that none of their money or fake prestige could ever buy. True family is not defined by the blood in your veins. It is defined by the people who protect you when the wolves are circling. And sometimes, the fiercest courage you will ever witness comes from the quiet whisper of an 8-year-old child telling the truth when all the adults are looking the other way. Has someone in your family ever tried to steal your joy or your future just to benefit themselves? How did you walk away and build your own peace? Tell me your story in the comments below. If you believe that true justice always finds a way, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and stick around for the next video. I will see you next time.